on images itself. We do a lot of work on images. For example, we use image recognition to sort of even do recommendation. For example, particularly in clothing, where you can look at the picture and based on style, texture, and so on and so forth, you provide sort of a recommendation, right? Essentially, again, the motivation is to make sure that pricing is right? Sometimes what sellers can do is they'll say they'll take a 400 rupee issue, say it's 1,000 and give a 60% discount. And we are trying to find more intelligent ways to detect these sort of things. Here is an example, right? So one way is to look at the image and try to figure out the price based on what's written there, right? Here are some other examples, right, where you can sort of leverage the image on the catalog and see whether you can figure out what the price is. It's a fairly complex problem because you have these undulations, so occlusions. Basically, it's wavy and it's also hidden partially and so on and so forth. And it could be rotated as well. So these are some of the classic problems. And so basically you do a lot of image processing, you make it a binary image, and then you extract out where the text is, and obviously this is very sparse data, right, because you're going to have an image and prices in a very small place. And then you do a lot of both pre-processing and machine learning to basically be able to recognize the content, right? And then you can sort of compare to see what the real price should be and so on and so forth. And if you find sellers who are inflating this, then you delist them and so on and so forth. So these are some of the examples, right? I'll stop it here, but the overall theme is, right, it's essentially data science, machine learning, systemic intelligence, whatever you call it, right? It percolates at a different level of complexity, at different level of maturity across multiple different systems in the organization. I would say we are probably in a journey of 100 miles, we are probably 5-10 miles into the journey. I would say that about e-commerce in India itself, right? There's a lot of problems to be solved, and there are a lot of problems to be solved very scalably. And it's a long road even here, but I think the potential is just immense, particularly for data science, what can be done, because there are some big problems in e-commerce that somebody is going to sort of crack, and this is how do you get to the next level of tier of cities, how do you go to villages, how do you solve real problems for real commerce problems that people have in the country. Means probably India is one of the countries with the smallest fraction of organized retail. Most of retail is unorganized, and when retail is unorganized, there is very difficult to sort of manage quality, so on and so forth. And there is a huge set of problems to be solved related to that, and a lot of that can be solved through data science and crowdsourcing, and a lot of ways to solve these problems, a lot of interesting ways and a lot of interesting problems to solve, right? And many ways I would say it's day one of e-commerce as far as India is concerned. Thank you.
So we have about 2 minutes left for questions.
Thank you, Ravi, for the astonishing session and sharing the breadth of BI and depth of analytics at Flipkart. My question comes from the area of KPI tree and the accountability.
Got it.
Where there could be case of handling overlapping areas, multiple persons sharing same KPIs, and some KPIs are strongly correlated positively and some are negatively correlated.
Correct.
So how to resolve that, like applying weights
these are all not just weights, these are very serious statistical models which are actually quantitative, right? So if I drive up selection index by X%, I will actually predict what happens to the hierarchically next level KPI like this thing. This is not just about building a set of metrics. These are actual models which can simulate what happens to the thing. So then accountability becomes fairly straightforward, right? At some level of granularity, accountability has to be be with one person. Usually we say if this is the L0 metric, we call that the L0 metric, traffic, growth, blah, 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 L0 metric. Now, maybe at a L1 metric it's still owned by, at L1 metric ideally you want to, when you break this down to the input drivers of say this L0 metric, you want to break it in a way that it is owned by one CXO. Right? As you break it down further, at some level of granularity, it has to be owned by somebody. The question is, can you rigorously build this, right? And I wouldn't say we are obviously 100% there, but our models are fairly robust that people don't end up questioning, pointing fingers nearly as much with this than without this.
Hi. Thanks for the session here in the corner. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean,
Can't
your
see it.
analytics-driven
Yeah.
decisions about segmentation, for example, and driver analysis, for example, conversion drivers that you were talking about, I'm just interested in knowing that what is the periodicity of this analysis? You know, I mean, given that 10 million users visit you every day and
Yeah. No, that's a good question. I think the KPI tree, I think, see, we refresh the KPI tree models once in a quarter, 3-4 months. It's once in 3-4 months. I built this for the first time in April, that time frame, and I refreshed it sometime very recently. Things don't change dramatically, but they do change a little bit based on the market dynamics and so on and so forth, definitely, right? Conversion drivers, some of the conversion drivers will never ever change. For example, availability, out of stock, poor website experience, app crashes, blah, 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 will always be detrimental to conversion. Some things will evolve. For example, I can show you in this one, right? Let's take something like electronics. See, I don't look at this and say this is the world. I look at this and also say what is the world you want. For example, you take electronics. I don't want that world, right? I don't want the world where sale price is the number one driver of conversion, right? I don't want that world. How do you change that world? So it's not just about measuring it, right? It's also about what is the world you want and is this the world you want for fashion, right? And this also shows also in some ways where we are really strong, where we need to get stronger, right? We are very strong in fashion, where you're seeing the driver of conversion is actually the selection we have. So people are swiping and they're seeing more selection and they're buying more, right? Whereas in electronics, what they are seeing is primarily people are trying for sale price discount and so on and so forth. So the question is, there are two answers to your question. One is, yeah, the dynamics of each model depends on what the system you're trying to model. Conversion may be a little bit more regular. We would rerun the model maybe every month or 2 months. A KPI tree probably every 4 or 5 months. There are some other things which may not change at all. Also, you want to drive behavior. Seeing that, I'm not going to say, oh, let's have more discounts. What we will say is, why is it that there is nothing else? What are the other drivers? Why is a brand not an important driver? Why is something else not an important driver? That's also the other question.
We'll take one last question.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Smriti from Ravi.
Sorry?
Can you hold the mic closer?
Yeah, I'm Smriti from Ravi.
Okay.
And my question to you is, all these days we have been hearing that as an organization, the data and analytics strategy for the organization has to be built right from the inception. So my question was, how did Flipkart go about it right at the beginning? And anything now looking back, you think you would like to have changed at that stage?
No, I think one thing I can tell you what I would sort of look at, right? And this is true of any startup. Right? Any startup, most startups don't grow with data platform being a very huge priority. In fact, I joined Flipkart a year and a half, 2 years back, and we spent a lot of energy building the right data platform and so on and so forth, right? And I think if I had to tell a startup today what you could do differently is, and this is true of every startup goes through this journey of first getting the business going and then starting to worry about things like collecting the right data and so on and so forth. My suggestion would be the next generation, like 10 years from now if you are a startup or 5 years from now if you are a startup, start making sure that the data platform is right up front.